Jordan Peterson once said something that shocked millions of people. He said, "A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control." Most people heard this and thought he was being provocative, controversial, extreme. But he wasn't. He was quoting an idea that is over 100 years old. An idea from the mind of one of the most brilliant psychologists who ever lived, Carl Jung. Jung called it the shadow. And both he and Peterson agree on one thing. If you don't face the monster inside you, it will come out on its own. And when it does, you won't be in control. Let's start with what the shadow actually is, because most people get this wrong. They think the shadow is their evil side, their dark twin, some hidden demon lurking in the basement of their mind. It's not. Jung defined the shadow as everything about yourself that you refuse to see. Every emotion you were told was wrong. Every impulse you learned to suppress. Every desire you buried because it didn't fit the image you built for the world. Your anger? Shadow. Your ambition? Shadow. Your sexuality? Shadow. Your selfishness? Shadow. Your hunger for power? Shadow. Not because these things are evil, but because someone, a parent, a teacher, a church, a culture, told you they were. And you believed them. So you cut those parts away. You pushed them underground. You locked them in a basement inside your own mind and threw away the key. And you thought you were safe. Jung said otherwise. He wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." Meaning, the more you ignore it, the stronger it gets. The more you pretend you're only light, the darker the darkness becomes. Jung discovered this not just through theory. He discovered it through himself. In 1913, Jung went through what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. He was a successful psychiatrist, a former student of Sigmund Freud, respected, accomplished, in control. And then his inner world collapsed. He began having visions. Dark, violent, terrifying images flooded his mind. He saw rivers of blood covering Europe. He saw civilizations crumbling. He saw a monstrous darkness rising from within himself. Most people would have run. Most people would have medicated. Most people would have shut it down and gone back to pretending. Jung did the opposite. He sat down and he went in. For years he recorded his visions, his dreams, his encounters with the darkest parts of his psyche. He wrote and painted them in a private journal that would later become known as the Red Book. It is one of the most extraordinary psychological documents ever created. And what Jung found inside himself changed psychology forever. He found that the darkness was not random, not meaningless, not evil. It was intelligent. It had a purpose. It was trying to communicate. The shadow was not trying to destroy him. It was trying to make him whole. And this is where Jordan Peterson enters. Peterson studied Jung for over 30 years. He read the Red Book. He lectured on Jung's ideas to thousands of students at the University of Toronto. And he took Jung's discovery and translated it for the modern world in a way no one else has done. Peterson's most famous idea about the shadow can be summarized in 3 words. Be a monster. Not act like a monster.
Not become cruel or violent or destructive. Be capable of it, and then choose not to. There's a critical difference. Peterson explains it like this. Imagine two men. The first man has never been in a fight. He avoids all conflict. He agrees with everyone. He never raises his voice. He never says no. He lets people walk over him. He lets people take his time, his energy, his dignity, and he says nothing. The world calls him nice. But is he really nice? Or is he just afraid? Peterson says he's not choosing peace.
He's incapable of anything else. He has no teeth, no fire, no edge, no capacity for violence or confrontation, and therefore, his peace means nothing. It's like a man who has no money saying he's generous. You can't give what you don't have. Now imagine the second man. He's strong, he's trained, he's capable of genuine aggression. He knows exactly what he could do if someone pushed him far enough. He's felt the rage. He's looked into that dark place inside himself. He's seen the monster. But he controls it. He chooses when to speak and when to stay silent. He chooses when to fight and when to walk away. He chooses peace, not from weakness, but from strength. Peterson says, only the second man is truly virtuous, because virtue without the capacity for evil is not virtue at all. It's just weakness wearing a costume. Peterson often illustrates this with a story from the book of Genesis, the story of Cain and Abel. Abel makes his sacrifices properly. He gives the best of what he has to God, and God rewards him. Life goes well for Abel. Cain, on the other hand, does not. He cuts corners. He offers less. He holds back the best for himself. And when life doesn't reward him, he doesn't look inward. He doesn't ask what he did wrong. Instead, he looks at Abel, and he feels resentment. That resentment, that dark, burning, bitter feeling of watching someone succeed while you suffer, that is the shadow speaking. And Cain had a choice. He could face it. He could look at himself. He could ask the painful question, what am I doing wrong? What have I refused to sacrifice? What part of me needs to change? But he didn't. He chose the easy path. He killed Abel. Peterson says this story is not just an ancient myth. It's a map of what happens inside every person who refuses to face their own darkness. The resentment doesn't go away. The bitterness doesn't dissolve. The shadow doesn't shrink just because you ignore it. It grows, and eventually, it acts. Through self-sabotage, through cruelty disguised as honesty, through passive aggression, through sudden explosions of rage that seem to come from nowhere. But they don't come from nowhere. They come from the basement, from the locked room, from the shadow you pretended didn't exist. Jung saw this pattern in patient after patient. The people who tried the hardest to be good, pure, moral, perfect, were the ones who eventually had the worst breakdowns. The nicest people, the ones who never said no, who always smiled, who always helped, who never complained. They were the ones who one day exploded in rage for no reason, or fell into depression they couldn't explain, or destroyed their marriages with sudden cruelty that shocked everyone, including themselves. Peterson saw this in his clinical practice too. He tells the story of clients, often women but sometimes men, who were extremely agreeable. They said yes to everything. They took care of everyone. They never expressed a need. They never set a boundary. They never said the word no. And they came to Peterson's office not understanding why they were miserable. On paper, they were wonderful people. Everyone loved them. Everyone praised them. Everyone relied on them. But inside, they were drowning. Peterson would tell them, "You're not good. You're just afraid of conflict." And the room would go silent, because it was true. Their niceness wasn't a choice. It was a survival strategy, built in childhood, maintained by fear, and it was eating them alive. Peterson would say, "You need to learn to be aggressive. You need to learn to say no. You need to learn to be dangerous." And they would look at him like he was insane. "But I don't want to hurt people." And Peterson would respond, "You're already hurting people. You're hurting yourself. And eventually, the resentment you're building up inside will explode outward and hurt everyone around you. The only question is, do you want to control how that happens, or do you want to let the shadow decide?" This is the core of both Jung and Peterson's message. The shadow is not optional. You don't get to choose whether you have darkness inside you. Every human being does. The only choice you have is whether you face it consciously or let it run your life from the basement. Peterson uses another powerful example that comes directly from Jung's thinking. He asks his students, "How many of you, if you were a guard at Auschwitz, would have followed orders?" The room goes quiet. Nobody wants to answer. Because the comfortable answer is, "Not me. I would never. I'm a good person." But Peterson says, that's a lie. He says, the evidence of history is absolutely clear. Ordinary people, teachers, doctors, fathers, mothers, churchgoers, committed unspeakable atrocities, not because they were born evil, but because they never confronted the capacity for evil inside themselves. They never asked, "Under what circumstances could I become a monster?" And because they never asked, they had no defenses when the time came. Peterson says, if you don't understand how the Nazis were possible, you don't understand yourself, because the same potential lives inside every human being. This is not meant to depress you. This is not meant to terrify you. This is meant to wake you up, because the flip side of this truth is incredibly powerful. When you face your shadow, when you finally turn around and look at the monster, you don't just become more aware. You become stronger. You become more integrated, more grounded, more real, more capable of genuine compassion, not the fake kind built on avoidance, but the real kind built on understanding. You understand cruelty because you've seen it in yourself. And that understanding makes your kindness authentic. You understand rage because you felt it fully. And that awareness makes your patience a choice, not a prison. You understand darkness because you've walked through it. And that journey makes your light mean something. This is what Jung meant by individuation. The process of becoming whole. Not by being only light, not by being only dark, but by integrating both into a single, conscious, complete self. Peterson often uses the metaphor of the dragon and the treasure. In virtually every mythology, every fairy tale, every hero story, there is a dragon. And the dragon guards a treasure. The hero must go into the cave, must face the terrifying beast, must risk everything. And only after defeating or taming the dragon does the hero find the gold. Peterson says, the dragon is your shadow. The cave is the part of yourself you're afraid to enter. And the treasure? The treasure is who you could become if you had the courage to go in. Your full power, your full voice, your full authenticity.
Everything you've been suppressing, everything you've been denying, everything you've been afraid of. That's where the gold is. Not in the light, not in the safe, approved, polished version of who you've been pretending to be. The gold is in the dark. Always has been. So how do you actually do it? How do you face the thing you've spent your entire life running from? Both Jung and Peterson agree on the path, and it's not comfortable. The first step is to stop identifying as harmless. Peterson says most people build their identity around being nice. I'm a good person. I don't get angry. I don't have dark thoughts. I would never hurt anyone. That's not a description of virtue. That's a denial of reality. Every human being has the capacity for cruelty, for destruction, for evil. The first step is admitting that, not acting on it, not celebrating it, simply admitting it, saying to yourself, there is something inside me that could do terrible things, and I need to know what it is. Jung called this meeting the shadow. Peterson calls it voluntary confrontation with what you'd rather avoid.
Both of them say, this is the most important thing a person can do. The second step is to pay attention to what triggers you. Jung made an observation that sounds simple, but is devastatingly accurate. He said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The things that bother you most in other people are almost always reflections of your own disowned qualities. When you despise someone's arrogance, ask yourself where your own arrogance hides. When you judge someone's selfishness, ask yourself where you've denied your own needs. When you can't stand someone's anger, ask yourself where you've buried your own rage. The shadow loves to hide behind the finger you point at others. Peterson adds another layer to this. He says, pay attention to your fantasies, not just your dreams, your daydreams, your dark thoughts, the scenarios that play in your mind when someone wrongs you. What do you imagine doing? Most people are horrified by these thoughts. They push them away. They think something is wrong with them. Peterson says, nothing is wrong with you. Those thoughts are information. They're the shadow trying to tell you what it needs. Maybe it needs a boundary. Maybe it needs a voice. Maybe it needs to fight for something instead of always surrendering. Don't act on the dark thoughts, but don't ignore them either. Listen to them. Understand them. They are the map to your unlived self. The third step is the hardest. Reclaim what you buried. The anger you suppressed, it's not evil. It's a boundary waiting to be set. The ambition you killed, it's not selfish. It's a purpose waiting to be lived. The wildness you crushed, it's not chaos. It's a freedom waiting to be felt. The sexuality you shamed, it's not dirty. It's a vitality waiting to be expressed. The aggression you denied, it's not dangerous. It's a strength waiting to be directed. Every piece of the shadow you integrate doesn't make you darker. It makes you more complete, more powerful, more real, more alive than you've felt in years. Jung called this individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you were always meant to be. Peterson calls it the voluntary adoption of responsibility for your full nature. Different words, same truth. You are not meant to be only light. You are not meant to be only dark. You are meant to be both, held together by consciousness, by choice, by will. That is what makes a person powerful, not the absence of darkness.
the mastery of it. Peterson tells his students something that I want to leave you with. He says, "You should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then learn how to control it." People hear this and flinch, but what he's really saying is, know your power, know your capacity, know your darkness, and then choose consciously, deliberately, who you want to be. Not because you have no other option, but because you have every option and you choose wisely. That is strength. That is virtue. That is what Jung spent his life teaching. That is what Peterson is trying to remind a generation that has forgotten. Carl Jung wrote these words over 100 years ago. "I'd rather be whole than good." Think about that. He didn't say, "I'd rather be evil." He didn't say, "I'd rather be dark." He said, "I'd rather be whole." Because good without whole is a mask, and whole without good is a monster. But whole and good together, conscious, integrated, complete, that is the person who changes the world. That is who you're supposed to become. So stop running. Stop pretending. Stop hiding behind the mask of niceness and the lie that you have no darkness. Turn around, walk into the cave, face the dragon, because everything you've ever wanted, every ounce of power, purpose, and peace, is on the other side of the thing you refuse to look at. Jung knew it. Peterson knows it. Now you know it too.
The only question left is, will you do it? If this video reached something real inside you, something behind your own mask, leave a comment below. Tell me, what part of your shadow are you finally ready to face? Subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. The darkness isn't your enemy. Your refusal to look at it is.